Hello YouTubers, welcome to the Baiterhood. Are you ready to take your salmon and trout fishing to the next level? Hey, in this video, we're diving deep into the world of soft plastic baits and showing you how they can be a game changer for catching salmon and trout. Stay tuned to learn the best techniques, lures, and tips. Hey, if you're new here, thanks for joining us. My name is Carl with DVL Custom Lures. Today, we're going to explore a fishing technique that is just lethal on salmon. It works very well on trout as well, but for salmon, this is about the only way you can catch these salmon out of these deep, cold mountain lakes. Now, where I'm at here in Wyoming, we have several lakes just filled with salmon. Let's look at their life and explore a little bit about how salmon feed and why they bite your baits. Deep beneath the surface of the water, there's this little magic line. This is a line where water turns from warm, highly oxygenated water to cold, very little oxygen, dark, deep water. And that line's called the thermocline. Now, to find the thermocline is quite easy. You just send a temperature probe down. And when that temperature probe drops in about a 10, maybe 15 degree difference in about a 10 to 15 foot area, that's the thermocline. Why is the thermocline so important? Because that's where salmon live. And trout. But let's look at why salmon live there. Below the thermocline, there's very little oxygen. Nothing can survive there. Above the thermocline, it's rich in oxygen, and a lot of things survive there, especially predators. So the salmon don't want to spend a majority of their time above that thermocline where they can get preyed upon. Now, salmon can't spend their time below the thermocline because there's not enough oxygen for them to survive. But right in that thermocline is that happy medium. Nice cold water, yet there's oxygen. There's also something else, a salmon's food. Now, salmon eat zooplankton. Zooplankton are these tiny, tiny little creatures. Most of them not much larger than a pinhead. And the salmon feed on those zooplankton. Now, they are an animal. They breathe, they have a heartbeat, they have a nervous system, they have a brain, they have everything an animal needs. And they're a very important part of the ecosystem. If you want to know if your lake or pond is healthy, just look for zooplankton, sometimes called a water flea. Now, a water flea, better scientifically called the Daphnia, is just this little white dot that darts around in the water really fast. And that's what salmon eat. And the way salmon eat it is they open their mouth and they swim around, and their gill rakers allow the water to pass through, yet they catch these Daphnia and then they digest them. That's what salmon eat. Now, you're not going to go out and fish with a bait the size of a pinhead. That's unreasonable. You couldn't even have a hook that small that would still penetrate a salmon's mouth or a trout's mouth. You wouldn't be able to see to tie it on your line, and there wouldn't be lines small enough to tie something like that on. So for salmon fishing in particular, and this works very well for trout as well, we use what are called hoochies. Now, a hoochie is just this small little pink squid looking thing. And pink is the best color because of the way the salmon see, the colors that they see. And we can get into more on that on a different video, but this is a hoochie. I have never seen a mold made, and there might be, and I just haven't seen it, to make these hoochies. But we can make something very close to that and that's called a tube. But a better question to ask yourself, other than what mold am I going to use, is why would a hoochie work? Now, hoochies are rigged up quite simply in a snell rig, 2 hooks on a line, then a bead, and that hoochie pushes over that bead, and then another bead and a spinner of some sort to attract some attention. Now, a hoochie is hooked up behind what we call a dodger. Dodgers and flashers come in a huge variety of shapes and sizes. You can have big dodgers, even dodgers bigger than this, or a small, slender, kind of fish-shaped dodger that's rather small and flat. Or the most popular is a skateboard dodger. In other words, it's bent on one end and the other end's bent the opposite direction, and they're bent that way for a very specific reason. A hoochie is hooked up on a short leader. The length of leader is determined by the size of the dodger. As a general rule, between 2 and 2.5 times the length of your dodger is how long your leader needs to be before you get to your hoochie. There's a reason for that. This hoochie, because of this bent shape, swings back and forth behind a trolling ball. Now, if you've never fished for salmon, what you want to do is you want to drop a trolling ball on a downrigger down to the thermocline, maybe slightly above, generally not really below the thermocline, but a good place to start is right in the thermocline. Okay, then you let out about 25-30 feet of line, depending on how boat shy the fish are, and your dodger hooks up to that line. Now, behind that, your 2.5 times the length is your hoochie with the little spinner, and generally you would tip one of the hooks with a piece of shoe peg corn that's been cured in like a garlic or anise scent or a worm scent, some kind of scent. Now, all that helps, and we don't know why. The scent, of course, we all know that as scent is released into the water, it disperses rather rapidly. That scent leaves a trail that a fish can follow to find your bait. That's all it does. The salmon's not going to eat that shoe peg corn. We're not even sure why they eat a hoochie. The hoochie doesn't look like a flea, like a water flea, a daphnia that zooplankton is named after. That scent will lead them up to it. So why would a salmon strike at a hoochie? If you've ever been fishing, you've probably seen a zooplankton. Some people call it a water flea because they look like a little tiny flea swimming around in the water, and they dart around really fast. Okay, they're generally white in color, and they just have these 2 little antennae sticking out from a round, kind of tear-shaped body. Those antennae twitch, and that's what propels the zooplankton throughout the water. Now, many fish eat zooplankton, especially small fish. So if you want to judge the health of a pond or a lake where you're fishing, look for zooplankton. Get a cup of water and look in it and see if there's zooplankton. If you find zooplankton, that's a very, very healthy fishery. So that's all that salmon eat is zooplankton. So could it be that this hoochie under the water to a salmon looks like a massive, huge zooplankton that's going to fill it up real fast? Maybe. Nobody knows. I have yet to see a salmon laying down on a bed and a salmon psychologist asking it, so how does that make you feel? But if I ever do run into that situation, I'll be sure and let you know. That'll be a whole video in itself. In the meantime, you have a hoochie. Now, in the home bait making world, I've never seen a mold that will make a hoochie. So there's a close second though, and that's a tube jig. So let's make us a couple tube jigs, and we'll see if they look anything like this hoochie when we're done. Our plastisol is up to temperature. Let's build a color. Pink, hot pink, seems to be about the best color for the hoochie. So to make hot pink, I'm using LureWorks Hot Pink 111. We'll start out with 25 drops. That's not quite enough. Let's go 25 more. That's much nicer. That's a nice color, but I want to lighten it up a little bit, so let's add 5 drops of white. Bada bing, bada bang. There's our color. A nice, bright pink. To that, I want to add 1/4 spoon of really fine gold flake. Now, this is the Hobby Lobby ultra fine gold holographic. It says it's 1/128th, which is about 0.007. A good heaping quarter of that. Why so fine? Very good question. We're going to shoot these into a mold that has these little tubes that have these splines on it. And if you use larger glitter, you will plug those splines up. So, stay fine, my friend. Stay fine. We got our color mixed up. Now we have to prepare our molds. And yes, we do have to prepare these molds. So you're going to take these rods out of your mold, and they need to be oiled. If you don't oil these, you're going to have a headache getting these little splines off without tearing them up. Okay? If you don't cut them completely off, you'll end up bending them and tweaking them, twisting them, and they just won't flow right. So oil your splines. And the best way I found to oil my splines is I take a little mineral oil or worm oil and I put it in the tub, and this is one of those construction sponges. I lay them on there and I give it a squish. Roll them back and forth a time or two. Perfectly lubed every time. So we'll put them back in there. And this is just how I lube them. You don't have to. You can put some worm oil on your fingers and roll it around. I've seen people use worm oil on a paper towel. Seems to work pretty good. I guess you play, you pay, you figure out what works for you. I'm fat, I'm lazy, this works for me. So once you get these back in here, we are going to simply close up our mold. Now this is 2 different sizes of mold, and in another video we will explore some really fun things you can do with these molds, like making laminates, making 3-color laminates. How do you make 3-color laminates without an injector or a triple injector? Well, that's quite easy on these, because you shoot a laminate color on a or you shoot a color on your smaller mold. Okay, then you take your rods with that color on them and you place them in a larger mold and you shoot a laminate over the top of them, and now you got 3 colors. Cool things you can do. We'll explore that in another video. For today, what we're exploring is the most basic, replacing the hoochie type of bait. Okay, little tube jigs. I love these. When I was a kid, we used to fish with tube jigs, and man, I used to catch crappie and bluegill like you would not believe. So close up the mold. We're going to carefully stand it up. You don't want to open that because all them tubes will fall back out. Let me get us a clampy dampy. We're going to clamp this up. Move that so that I don't spill it like I am thinking I'm going to. Because if anybody can make a mess, I can. I am the master mess maker. Let's check our temperature. Yeah, that's getting a little thick. Here's the trick. Yeah, we're a little cool. I'm gonna pop this in the microwave. Here's the secret to pouring good tubes. You know, if you get this, these are called the skillet on Angling AI's website. Great molds. I love these molds. They are fantastic. But one thing about these molds is you must pour them warm. Okay, by warm, I mean you want these upwards of 335 to 340. Okay? You're going to be shooting this into a mold that's going to make these very fine tentacles, and if this isn't warm, it won't flow around those tentacles very well on those tubes, okay? The molds are cold, the tubes are cold, the rods are cold, everything's cold, the injector's cold, so, you know, I'm going to be high on that 340 range. So, we'll give it a quick shot. Nice and even pressure, even speed. You don't have to run a race. Okay, there we go. We'll top these off. Oh man, look at all that beauty. And we will be right back with you as soon as these cool down. Our molds have cooled down, and we're going to unveil all the glory. Start with the Skillet 250. Look at that. Look at that. They all look like they poured pretty good. A few of them are a little short, but that's might be because the rods were a little cold. Oh goodness, that one came out like a monkey. That one looks like it poured better. Here we go. This is the funnest part of making a hoochie. We'll tear a couple of these off. Okay? Now, I've seen guys sitting there stripping these off and they tear them up. These are so easy. Watch this. Whoop. Ha. Just a simple little twist is all it takes. Do the twist, twist. See? Quick little twist, and those things are right off of there. And this doesn't matter if that's these little tubes like this, the big tube molds, the do-it tubes, they're all the same way. A quick little twist, and off they come. If you do this to get them off, especially if you haven't oiled that rod, you take a chance on, these are sharp, very sharp edges, and you'll cut your little tentacles, your little legs off your tube. So I'm going to get these all off of here, get it loaded up. We'll warm our plastisol up. We'll see if we can't get another shot. And then we'll look at how to rig this thing up. Watch this trick. Every one of them right off that sprue. Okay, plastisol is warmed up. Let's get one more shot out of here. Okay, here's the fun. If you're gonna shoot a whole bunch of these, you know, you don't have to lay them back in the mold. Quite often I'll throw them back on my sponge. Generally, what I have found, and I don't know if it'll work for you, it works for me, but it might not work for you. But what I have found is that if I oil my rods when I first start making my baits, and then I can do 2 shots, and then I have to oil them again. So, and every shot I take, I try to keep that temperature. Once the molds are warmed up and doing good, you can go down kind of on that lower end at 330. But until your molds are warm, I usually try to stay myself up to that 230 mark, you know, the upper part of 230. So the really cool thing with these skillet molds is, like, this mold is the skillet 250. Okay, I have a skillet 200 as well. So like in my case, I'd shooting at 250. I transfer these rods with the plastoner to this mold, and when I shoot the 290, all I shoot is just this top part. So I can make pink tentacles and then shoot white over it. You know, there's a huge variety. I've done where I've shot scuppernog tentacles and then done motor oil over the top, and that was really, really lethal on the crappie and the bluegill and stuff. You know, because I take a lot of handicapped kids out fishing, and so you want to have a bait that is going to keep them actively. You know, they have to stay active, because if they're not catching fish, they'll get bored real easy. So I change the baits often. I go out ahead of time and I take my grandkids out and stuff like that, and we find out where the fish are and what they're biting. So when I take the handicapped kids out, I'm already a leg up on them, so to speak. Try saying that. Except for I got like 14 right legs. You only got 1. It sucks to be you. So we'll get these off. Close up the mold. I like to keep these closed as much as I can because those rods need to stay clean. I got lazy one day and ran in to eat dinner and left my mold open, and just the dust and stuff, because it was windy out, got on them rods, and it didn't shoot worth a darn until I cleaned up them rods. So I always make it a habit of immediately removing these. And the beauty is you can stack them like that. They don't have to be laid out nice and beautiful. The tails aren't going to bend. They're not going to stay misformed and stuff. So what do you say we rig this up? Now, generally, when I want to rig these up, what I do is I sneak in the house, and when my owner isn't looking, I steal one of her great big sewing needles or embroidery needles. But she's in the house right now guarding her embroidery stuff, and so I have to do this a different way. And the way I've done it is I take a real thin piece of small wire and I bend it in half, and then I take that and I poke it right through there, and I come out the back side. Then I take my fishing line that I have snelled my hooks on, okay, and you always want to use 2 hooks because some of them are going to strike short, and then I put just a single bead right up against that hook. Then I take my fishing line, and I hope you guys are seeing this okay, but what I do is I feed it up through, I hope I can see it okay. I feed my fishing line up in between that wire, okay, and I feed a little bit in, and then I simply slide my tube off and pull that fishing line through. So that's the easiest way I've found to do this. If you buy a hoochie in the store, it already has a hole punched in it, but this works. So I slide that up, and there's our bead and our hooks. I just slide that down until that bead is at the top. I try to get it right in the middle of those tentacles. But when that bead is at the top of that tube in there, that's all the further you need to go. So you can see it's right there in that very tip of that tube. And now I want to put on 4 beads. I like to use 4 beads between the tube and my spinner blade. So there's 1 bead, there's 2 beads, there's 3 beads. You could do like the count does. No, 4 beads. No, My wife asked me one time why I do that. She says, "What, are you 4? Because kids that are 4 watch Sesame Street." And I says, "Good, I'm 4. I'll go with that." Then I put on my spinner blade. Now, I have found that you can put your spinner blade directly on your line. You don't necessarily need a clevis if you don't have one. And sometimes I get a better action not using a clevis. But that's completely up to you. You know, it's your bait. Make it your way. This ain't McDonald's. Then I put my last bead. So I got 6 beads altogether. 1 inside the tube, then 4. And what I'm looking for is I want that blade to hang down somewhere close to where those tentacles start. That's how I know how many beads to put on there. And then I put a bead on the top just to kind of dress it up. And you'll see that when you do that, that will get to spinning and it will just go crazy. And it works really well. And this is fantastic for salmon, perfect for trout. Trout love this too. You can drag this in a stream. You can drag it behind a boat on a downrigger. You know, I've even thrown them out there and just fished them straight in to catch trout. Now, if I was making these to target only trout, I would go with pink tails and then shoot white over the top because trout are crazy about pink and white. And then you want to measure out your dodger if you're going to set these up behind a dodger. And I just tie a simple loop in the top. I double knot the loop, so in other words I go through and I go through a second time, and then I pull this up close so that my loop isn't outrageously big. Pull her up tight, and I take my handy dandy super duper fishing pliers, and because that's what I got handy, and I nip off that tag end, and there you go. You are set up to catch salmon. That is a pretty hoochie.